This short presentation is to describe the procedure for clone symbols within Portara Downloader. And clone symbols allow you to have two mutually exclusive commodities, both the same like crude oil, but apply different rules to them. And it's useful if you wish to create a series of independent continuous data where each one's nearest future is one increment further out. So let me explain that. So let's click and open the format grid and scroll down to crude oil as an example. And if we then right click on crude oil, and we can see there, look, create clone copy and delete clone copy. We're going to create clone copy, and you see now CLA underscore CO1, so that's clone 01 that stands for, and we can just carry on creating as many as we want of those. And now we've got 4 mutually exclusive crude oils that we can apply their own settings to. So in order for us to look into the continuous settings, we need to go into here. So our CLA, we'd normally click in there, the format rule would open, and we go into set up continuous data settings for CLA, and in there is the settings which come as standard. You can change all these if you want, but that's the standard setup for CLA. Now what we'll do, we're going to come out of there and we're going to go into CLA CO1, and as you'll see it's the same setup, but now it's the CLA CO1 rule. If we go into the continuous data setup in there, you'll notice this one's already been set to 2, and I'm going to show you why in a moment. But if we can set this to anything we want to, you can change these to suit your needs and requirements. But if we are going to set one to, to move forward through the continuous contracts, this set to 2 is fine, and we go save to that and save, and you're all set up. CO2, if we click on there and we go in there and we look in there, this one's now set to 3. And the reason is because I've done this prior to this video. I'd played around with this. Now the good thing is if you for some reason decide to delete this, or you delete this one here by accident and you think, oh, I've lost all my settings, you haven't really, because you can go back on there, and by creating that clone it's going to pick up those settings. And that's what you saw me pick up there, was those settings that we set them to. And I can prove that to you by changing CL01. If we go in there and we click in there, and I change that to say something like 7, just for the sake of it, and then we save, and then I get rid of these. So basically what I'm trying to show you there is that your settings are sticky. Alright, so if you do delete them, then they are sticky. Alright, so we'll just create those 3, and just to prove to you that that is the case, you go in there and you click, and it's 7. So I'm going to put that back now to 2, and we're good to go. Alright, so this is a way you can set this first one here to 1 contract forward, 2 contracts forward, 3, 4, etc., all the way up the curve, and then when you then run those later on, you're gonna get that. I'm just going to quickly run that for you. So to save a huge amount of data, I'm just going to set that to say 2022 is probably a good place to go, and I'm going to go CL8. Now notice in here you only actually see the actual cloned contracts in the format grid. So if we go down there, CLA, and they're in here, okay, they are not here. So when you're looking into your data, you don't see them in the data, because this data doesn't exist for those. They're just clones off this original. So if we right click on there and we say create continuous data, it's going to create the data for CLA itself and any underlying clones that you've got set up in the format rules. So that's the way it works in Portara Downloader, and we click it, and we can see now these 4 continuous contracts are running, and it's created the data. It's opened slightly off screen, so I'm just going to pull that in, and you can see in there now CLA, the original which is set to one contract forward, and there's the rolls all the way through, and then you can see this moving into the next one, which is CLO CO1, and this is 2 contracts forward, and then down into 3 contracts forward, etc. As many as you need to do, as long as you've got enough data there to be able to do that. And you can see if we just check from the top and we say, look, what on the last run there, we're rolling from 2024 into the June contract into July. If we go down to the next one, you can see there we're rolling from the July into the August, and into the next one we're looking at the August into the September, etc. So that's the way to go along the curve with continuous data, and that's how it works within Portara Downloader. So one extra thing before we wrap it up is I'm going to go back into format rules and just talk quickly about the difference between default rules and these independent rules here. So for futures data, you can go into the default rules and have one rule which basically applies to all the contracts underneath. If you're dealing with continuous data, obviously continuous data is on a per contract basis, on a per commodity basis, because obviously something like coffee would be completely different to crude oil, etc. So in order to change the underlying, you just do what I said before. You click on these and away you go. Those particular, so let's pick on one. Let's look at crude oil again. If we open that up, in here, this CLA rule is the same rule if you set it up in daily or in 1 minute or in tick data. It's still going to read the same rule, because you wouldn't want a different rule just because you're changing granularity. So the rule, no matter where you go in from, so to prove that, if I go into the 1 minute data and the format's in there, there's slightly a different colour in here, so you know that you're in a different granularity. But if we go into CLA in here and look again, now it's orange instead of yellow before. If we go into here, this is the same thing. Alright, so it's shared across all granularities, so be aware of that, okay, and which is what you want. And then the final thing is in the formats, the edit rule, as I was saying before, with the default, okay, has its own. So this is set up continuous data overrides. So what this is handy, if you just want one rule to override all the underlying rules that you've set up here, you can do that in certain circumstances. So it will become apparent when I click in there. So if I click in there, these are now going to override. So it's one rule that overrides all your data. Now some of them are not going to be helpful, alright, so but others will. So you might say, well look, I want to override everything in the database and I want it all back adjusted, because the default's back adjust. But then you might say, well look, I want them all zero adjusted. So for one click in there, and when you save it, you'll notice down here has gone black to show you that you're overriding in this particular template. Alright, so when you save now, doesn't matter how many commodities that you run there, they're all going to come off zero adjusted. Alright, so you've got an override, and that is on the, again, it's on the default rule, which applies to across all rules. So if you're not going to use individual rules, which I would recommend not, to be honest with you, just use one rule. If you've got like 100 symbols in the database, what's the point in setting 100 rules? You might as well just do one. Okay, and then you set these according to what your data needs are, and away you go. However, in the case of continuous data, you do need to set. Portara works out of the box, so the settings in here will run, but if you need to tweak them on an individual basis, then you can go in there as previously explained. And if you want to override those symbols, you can go into the main default rule, go in there, change them to whatever it is you need to to do. So it's handy, let's say, if you wanted to pull off all the data and have it, back to back with no overlap. So you could put it on there, for instance, or you might say the roll basis, I want everything rolled on settle or on last price across the whole data stream. Nearest futures, be careful with that, because some are not, it's up to you to figure out what the validity is. If you put it on like 26 and try to run it all, well, something like the indices don't go out that far, so you're going to make spurious data. So don't do that. You need to know what you're doing to use these settings. It's up to you, as long as you remember that. When they're all not in use like they are now, when you save it, let me just look at that again. It's not in use, so not in use, better. We save it, this override black mark down here goes away, so then it will not be overriding any of the underlying continuous data, but it will be looking at your settings here because you're in the format rule, which defaults for everything. Alright, so that's how you basically use Portara Downloader when it comes to formatting and it comes to clone symbols, to try and help you. Alright, so we'll leave it there and have a pleasant day.